In today's video, I'm going to show you how to get the perfect flower arrangement coming out of your orchid. Now, as a new gardener, your main focus is on getting these guys to bloom. And getting any kind of a bloom is a great success. But as you get a little more experience, you start realizing that sometimes the flower arrangement isn't quite as good as it could be. Let me show you a couple examples. This is an orchid I used in my video showing you how to solve crown rot on an orchid. It's been flowering for quite a long time, but it's got this low branch coming out the side here. And what we really want is a branch that comes up like this. We want to be able to see those flowers. So this isn't really a great display. This orchid is also starting to make a side branch, but it's coming out underneath here. And you might see that this bud here is ready to open, but it's going to open and the other branch is going to be in the way. It's not going to make a very nice display. If I come along now and raise this, you can see that the flowers are shaped kind of funny. The top one is upside down, the other one's about sideways. They're just not making a good display. And we can prevent this. This is my fault, not the orchids. Here's another one that's flowering. It's a really nice small yellow flowered one. But again, the stem is coming out sideways, and these are opening kind of funny. We really want a nice display like this. The trick to making your orchids look really great is to start when they're just flowering. Here's a small orchid. This is its first flowering, and you can see the stem is just coming up. It's about 2.5 inches long. It's not made any buds yet, and this is the right time to start. Before I show you how to make the flowers look better, let's talk about how this stem actually grows. When the flower inflorescence starts to grow, it's quite soft and pliable. As it gets a little longer and older, it gets woody, very similar to the shrubs in your garden. So once it's this tall, it's much harder to bend the bottom here because it's gotten kind of woody. It's easy to bend the tip because it's still nice and green. So one of the secrets here is to start early. Don't wait too long before you start shaping these flower stems. The other thing to realize is that different phalaenopsis will have different kinds of blooms. This is a small flowered orchid, and they tend to have lots of side branches. This is another small flowered one, and you can see it's got a branch coming out here, another one coming out here, the main stem coming out here. And this orchid always has lots of stems coming out. This orchid, on the other hand, is a large white, and the very large whites have big flowers, big leaves, but the stem almost never branches. So what you'll see is this long stem. And when this is finished flowering, it's going to be out here. It's 2 to 3 feet away from the plant. Whereas these smaller flowered ones are only going to be about 8-10 inches away from the plant. So the trick is to stake each of these a little different depending on how they're going to bloom. You can also make the display different ways. You now find a lot of orchids on sale where the stem is trained to be straight up and down like this, and the flowers face you this way. Now the reason they do that is that when the flower stem is straight up, it's very easy to ship this plant. In nature, this orchid stem tends to want to grow on an arc like this. But of course, shipping that is much more difficult. Either way is fine, and you can decide which of these displays you prefer. You can make it arch or have a nice straight up and down. I actually like them to arch. I think it looks much more natural. And as this stem gets longer and longer, you'll have a whole set of blooms here facing out. And that looks really nice. Now the other thing to think about is that these flower stems always grow towards the light. So if my window is over here, and I have this orchid here, it's going to grow like this. It's going to grow towards the light. So the second trick when you start having flower stems grow is never turn the orchid. So my window's over here, it's growing like this. If I come along now and turn it sideways, it will confuse these buds. Some will open this way, and some will open that way. So once you see buds, don't turn the pot. Always have it face the same way. And in fact, it's not a bad idea to actually put a line here to tell you where the window is. Okay, now that we know a little bit about how they grow and you've made a decision about which shape you actually want, it's time to figure out how to actually make it go in the direction you want. And to do that, I like to use a wire stem. Now the easy solution is just get yourself a bit of wire here, and I like a wire that's fairly stiff, but one that I can still bend a bit. Now if you go to the hardware store to buy some of these, they come in a roll and then you have to straighten them. But there's a little secret to that. Go to the hardware store where they're selling ceiling tile, and there they sell wire like this that's nice and straight. Now you might have to buy a little bundle of those, but they come about 3 feet long, they're all nice and straight, and that's the best thing for this. Now the simple solution is you just take your wire and your orchid and you stick it in the soil. And that works. The problem with that is that it doesn't hold very well in that pot. It moves a bit too much. There's nothing holding the bottom because it's just a very thin wire in this cocoa husk. So there's a better solution for that. I like to put a little ring at the end of my wires. These hold better on the pot than if I just used a straight wire like this. And they're really easy to make. Let me show you how. Take a regular pair of pliers, grab the end so there's a bit pointing out at the bottom, and now slowly turn this. When you're done, both ends of the wire will be pointing up and you'll have this circle. Now the spacing between the wire is probably a bit too close to fit onto the pot, so I take a little screwdriver here and loosen it a little bit. But just enough so that I can get it on the pot. I don't want this too loose. Now if you're using clay pots for your orchids, you'll need to make this spacing quite a bit bigger because clay pots are much thicker. Once you have that done, they clip really easily onto the side of a pot. And they're quite sturdy. If this bottom piece is at all loose, give that wire another pinch to strengthen it. That's really all there is to it. You don't need to buy these wires. Now this orchid should have been staked a while ago, but I'm going to use it for demonstration purposes. So you take your wire and clip it on the side of your pot. Then take your stem and start training it up this wire. Now you can use a variety of different things for doing that. This is a special orchid clip designed for holding the two together, and it works really well. You can get these on Amazon. And you just clip it on like this and you've attached it. As the stem grows, you'll need another clip a little higher up. Then you come along and you attach that. A week or two later, you come along again and you attach it again. This way you can make the stem grow in the direction you want. Now you don't have to get these little clips. What I usually use are just some twist ties. This looks a lot nicer if you use a green one, but I'll use the white one here so you can see it a little easier. Just take your twist tie and wrap it around the stem. Now you might want to cut these so they're not quite so long. You can cut each twist tie in half and make it do double duty. But that holds it just fine. Now let's say I want a different shape for this flower. I don't want it to go straight up. I want it to curve so I get this nice cascading effect. Well, what I would do is clip the first one on down here and then take the wire and start bending it. And then as I attach the stem, I start attaching it along the wire to also bend it. And that's how I get this nice long cascade. Now there is one problem with the wire, and that is you don't necessarily know how long to make the wire when you start this. Once you get to know your orchids, you'll have a better idea of this. So I start with a wire and I just guess. Okay, this one's a bit too long because I'm getting lots of buds right here. So I can cut it off and shorten it, or take it out and put a smaller wire in. Sometimes I have the opposite effect. I've made it too short and it needs to be longer. So what I'll do is that once the stem gets to the end of the wire, if it's still growing, I'll just replace this wire with a longer one. It's really no big deal. I've noticed that some of the orchids now, they're getting them to grow up like this and then back down again. And that's easy to do too. You just take your wire, give it another bend here, and then as the stem grows, just get it to go down here. Remember that if you're attaching the tip of it, it's quite green and soft, so it's very easy to bend it this way. Much harder to do with this old stem. So you can make these follow whatever shape you want. Hope you enjoyed this video. In the top right hand corner, I'm going to put a link to my orchid playlist. And it contains all of my orchid videos. They'll show you everything you need to know to grow orchids. How to repot them, how to water them, how to get them to flower, how to take care of pests and diseases. If you follow my advice in those videos, you'll have no trouble flowering orchids. Have fun with your plants.